4th, 2024. I'd like to ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilor Brooks.
Present.
Councilor Craig Cormier.
Present.
Councilor Jenowawitz.
Present.
Councilor Harder.
Present.
Councilor Heath.
Present.
Councilor Matt.
Present.
Councilor T-Vote Munoz.
Present.
Councilor Tassone. And Councilor Tyros.
Present.
And President Kuczynski.
Present. Is anyone here recording tonight's meeting? Okay. For the public watching this evening, we are meeting informally tonight regarding agenda item number 11197, district update from State Representative Jonathan Zlotnick. This was in the City Council and referred to the Committee of the Whole to schedule an informal meeting at our previous February meeting. I had asked Representative Zlotnick about coming to present this to the City Council, as it is customary for many state reps and different representatives to go to their towns and cities within their district and give an update. I know Representative Zlotnick has done it at several of the select boards in the past and with the select board's invitation, and so I brought it to the council, and the council unanimously voted to have him come to an informal meeting. And so without further ado, Representative Zlotnick, if you'd just like to come to the podium, into the microphone for the folks at home.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, for the invitation. We've done this pretty routinely at the towns of my district over the years, but this is the first time I've been invited to the here, so thank you very much for that. I thought I'd start with a quick update on the 3 home rule petitions that you have submitted to the legislature for approval, to let you know where those stand. The first is the petition relative to changing the city charter that was submitted to me a few months ago. Last week that was approved by the subject committee to which it was assigned. So the process will go from here. Now the next step will be to come to the House floor for a vote, to the Senate for a vote, and then the governor for her signature. So I anticipate that happening sometime before the end of the session. And it's hard to put an exact date on that. The second is the Heritage Park land transfer. This is something we've been working on in several different iterations over many years. The Cliff Notes is that we are looking to reacquire the property of the former Heritage State Park in downtown Gardner, which is across the street from MVOC on the other side of downtown. In exchange, the city would grant Stump Pond, which is adjacent to Dunn State Park, to the state to make that swap happen. So Dunn's would grow, which is something that the state is interested in pursuing, and the city would have the former Heritage State Park building, which was a city firehouse that was transferred to the state. The city would have that back to do whatever you all decide to do with it at that point. So we are moving through that process. There are going to be several more steps. Transferring property is something that there is a long and cumbersome process in doing. And as some of you have been around a little bit longer know, we've been down this road a couple times with various entities before we looked into transferring this back to the city. So we have a bit more to go on that. The last is the bill relative to civil service in the city's police department. Last term, the city council submitted a home rule petition to remove the police department in Gardner from civil service. The department has been in civil service since 1912, but admittedly there are a lot of issues with that system as it's currently run. And Gardner is not the only municipality petitioning the legislature to be removed from civil service. There are, in addition to Gardner, 17 other communities also have legislation pending. And prior to that, there were numerous communities in the past decade who have pursued similar action. We're in a bit of a different boat with this, and there's a little bit more explanation. So when this sort of deluge of petitions came from across the state, the legislature put a general pause on communities leaving civil service. And a civil service review commission was established to look at the issue more generally as to why so many communities, sort of in a short period of time, were opting out of the system. That process put all these bills, like I said, on hold, pending the outcome of that committee's work. That committee, a week or two ago, submitted their reform bill to the legislature, and so the city has kind of three different options. They can continue to pursue the home rule petition. They can accept the reform proposal and essentially stay in the system with the reforms that I expect to be enacted in one form or another, either by the end of this session or early next session. Or Gardner's in a somewhat unique position, and there might be a sort of additional option that the city has. Because the city joined civil service not by act of the legislature, but by, back then, a town meeting vote. What the Civil Service Review Commission has determined is that communities that entered into civil service through their own means, not through legislative approval, can exit through that same manner and do not need the approval of the legislature. So I've updated Mayor Nicholson and the Chief of Police as to these developments regarding this bill and the situation, and now it'll be up to you all to decide which course of action you want to take. The big thing that's going on in the legislature is we're starting, or I should say the budget process never really ends, but the budget process is picking up in earnest for FY25. The House will debate that first version of the budget the last week of April, and I'm sure everyone has seen that in the second half of this fiscal year, revenues have pretty steadily come in under benchmark, meaning they haven't hit the numbers that we thought they would. And while revenues are still growing year to year, they're not growing as much as was predicted at the beginning of the last budget cycle. And for anyone interested, the way that this works is at the start of the budget cycle, various state entities and economists get together and try and predict what that growth number is going to be, and then that is what the state budget is developed from. Massachusetts, as a state, is prohibited from deficit spending, unlike the federal government. So at the end of the year, the budget has to be balanced no matter what, which is why several months ago the governor took the step of what we call 9C cuts, which are unilateral cuts that are made by the governor. That's obviously something that is very much at the front of the discussion as we make the FY25 budget. Obviously, the state has had a number of very heavy revenue years. 2 or 3 fiscal years ago, there was so much excess revenue that $3 billion was returned to taxpayers in the form of rebates. So this is obviously a bit of, I think, a natural correction from those peak years. What I would say the good news is that because there was diligent fiscal management during those years, the state's rainy day fund stabilization account stands at $8.3 billion, which is the largest in Massachusetts history and one of the largest stabilization accounts in the country. And for comparison, the budget's around $50 billion in Massachusetts for the year. And the reason I say that's due to, I think, prudent fiscal management is that just like with all of you, there's never any shortage of needs or people who have legitimate ways to spend the people's money. But in those years, I think there was a lot of discipline exercised by the governor and the legislature to not spend that money and to put it away for, like the fund is named, rainy days. And to give you some comparison, in 2019, that fund stood at $3 billion, and when I was first elected in 2012, it stood at just $1 billion. So that is to say that while those benchmark revenues have lagged in the second half of this fiscal year, and it is something that we're keeping a close eye on as we enter planning for the next fiscal year, I think the existence of such a large stabilization fund does give us something of a cushion to operate on in anticipation of that. The other biggest, I would say the second biggest thing concerning the budget for this year is that this is the first fiscal year that the tax cut package that was passed last year is going to hit our books. In total, the tax cut package that went into law last year is worth about $1 billion a year. And I did just want to highlight a few things that I think are going to impact, especially the city of Gardner, more, or I should say the taxpayers here more. The senior citizen circuit breaker tax credit, which is available to taxpayers over 65, and just for sort of round numbers, if you're a couple and you file jointly, the number is about $100,000 a year is the cutoff to qualify for the tax credit. Then the other is the rental deduction of $4,000. And again, all of these are subject to different qualifications. The child tax credit up to $440 per child with no cap on the number of children. And then an increase in the EITC, which is the Earned Income Tax Credit, to 40% of what the federal credit is. So a round number there is if you have children and you make about $50,000, that credit is worth about $3,000 to you now from the state. Probably one of the biggest fiscal impacts from the state to the city is the public schools. A majority of the public school funding for the city of Gardner comes from the state budget. And in recent years, and we're still in sort of the implementation phase of this, but the Student Opportunity Act was passed 3 or 4 years ago now, and rewrote what we call the Chapter 70 formula, which is the governing formula to how that money gets dispersed. So not only did it change the way that money gets dispersed, which benefited Gardner in many ways, but also called for, once you correct for inflation, it's slightly over $1 billion in increased funding to the K-12 system across the state. So to give you some kind of idea of where that impact is, when this started, the state was putting between $3 and $4 billion into the Chapter 70 formula on an annual basis, and then municipalities collectively across the state were putting in about another $3 or $4 billion. Again, kind of round numbers. So this is a significant increase in the overall funding picture for the K-12 system, and also I think where the formula had not been updated since 1993, it takes into account a lot of the changes that have occurred over the almost 3 decades since that was done, since the formula was originally created, to take into account what education really costs, and to help out more municipalities address those needs, and make sure that, as we say, children in Massachusetts are getting an equal education regardless of their zip code, as is guaranteed by the Massachusetts Constitution. So like I said, that is on track to be fully funded again this year, which will again account for a substantial increase in state aid to Gardner in Chapter 70. As I'm sure you all are aware as well, Gardner has been the recipient of some fairly large economic and community development grants in recent years, and I could spend hours going through all those details. But there's one that I want to highlight in particular that I think we've been able to take really special advantage of, and in many ways I think was kind of made for us, which that's the Underutilized Properties Program, or as we say, UPP. And that was created in an economic development bill 4 or 5 years ago. And Gardner has been fortunate that we've been able to get 2 and some of the largest grants from that fund. Templeton, also in my district, recently got a fairly large grant from that fund as well. And the reason I say that was kind of, I felt custom built for us, is that when Governor Baker first pitched this to the legislature as a new program to build, how he said it was that he goes, every town, every city, there's a building or a parcel that no matter how hard you try, there's an issue with it and you just can't get it redeveloped, built, what have you. And with a little bit of state funding, you can bring these projects to fruition. So the three that my district has been able to take part in primarily concerned housing. Many of you were at the ribbon cutting for the new apartment building downtown. That received a $900,000 UPP grant. And like I said, it really is, it's crucial funding for two reasons. One, given the market conditions in many parts of the state like ours, these projects really couldn't happen without that funding. And then also it's something that a city the size of Gardner could not afford to do. So I think it is important that we keep that funding coming. And I think it's a very important program for a place like Gardner. And then the last thing, Route 140. At the suggestion of Councillor Heath, my office looked into, I'll say the safety record of Route 140. And it was approximately 6 years ago, at that time initiated through my office with the police chiefs and fire chiefs of Winchendon and Gardner for the state to conduct a safety review of that road, which resulted in the state investing in numerous safety improvements along that road. And now, 6 years on, looking at the data, we haven't seen the improvement in safety that we were hoping for. So what we've started to do, working with the chiefs again, and MassDOT, the Department of Transportation, is to review that and see if there's other things that we can do to try and reduce the amount of accidents on that road, as well as increase the safety of sort of the periphery along that road as well. The other issue with Route 140, and this is some good news. Some of you may recall this was several years ago now, but at my suggestion, we petitioned the state to take over Route 140. Route 140, it's somewhat unique in that it's owned by three different entities: the town of Winchendon, the state, and the city of Gardner. But even more so, it's not contiguous. So there's you go Gardner, state, Gardner, Winchendon, state, Winchendon, right? And that goes back to when the road was first built. And I'm told, this is before my time, but the state plows used to lift up when they came to the town section of road. Luckily, that doesn't happen anymore. But the issue is, and why we initiated that process years ago, was that if substantial repairs ever needed to be made to the town or city-owned portion of Route 140, that would take up probably all our Chapter 90 money for the year. So back then we petitioned the state to look at taking over the entire length of the road, and they refused us. Recently, in conversations I was having with MassDOT about a related issue, this issue came back up. And I'll say that we're being encouraged to petition the state again, and I've been sort of in my meetings with them. I think we've come to an agreement on how to make that happen, and so I'll be alerting the mayor and the city council president as to the process of that and the vote that you'll need to take if that's something you want to explore again. We'll also be undertaking the same process in the town of Winchendon, but it is something I would recommend because, again, the cost to repair that road, if it had to be borne by the city and town, would be substantial. Unless, we've always sort of been beholden to getting it on the tip, but if there was a year that we couldn't get on the tip, we'd really be in a tough financial position to get the road repaired. So that is my update. I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions, comments from the council? Seeing none, thank you, Representative Zlotnick, very much for all that information. Is there any other questions, comments from the council on the topic of the meeting? Thank you again. We will close this part of the meeting and reconvene at 7:30 for our regular meeting. Thank you.